Hello, my name is Mark Peterson. I've been asked to do this video. I have two basic functions. One is part of it is I'm a leader with the APF with a background in policy analysis and also in cognitive cultural anthropology. Got involved in this issue because I was interested in regulations, dual-use commodities, addiction, that sort of problem. But on a more personal level, I think that it really stems from the fact that I myself am a pain patient and injured myself not too severely lifting a 100-pound rock in archaeology some 20 years ago. Didn't seem to bother me at the time. I continued to work. At the time, I spent a huge amount of time on the computer. But as time went on, I started to have a feeling. I didn't know it was a back problem. I just felt funny. And finally, at that time, I was not treating it very well. Got to the point where it was just hard to move around. And went into an emergency clinic, asked to help, and they said, well, basically, you're in complete spasm. And they gave me medications, and I went home and thought that was it. And then over the next 2 years, I went through sort of a nightmare scenario where it would come, it would go, and I didn't realize it at the time that what I was beginning was the beginnings of chronic pain. I considered myself fairly well educated on this. I thought I understood, with a background in archaeology, the spine, but as it turned out, it was a much more severe problem. It wasn't going away easily. And I thought that I was dealing with occasional acute episodes, which in fact, over the long run, were chronic pain, and that it wasn't going to go away. At the time, I got myself under the care of I had no health insurance. This ended up being very expensive. I found myself abroad without medications. Decided never to let that happen, and at that point I was finishing up my PhD, got severe malaria, and it essentially disabled me for quite a while. I really underestimated the effect that the pain was going to have on me. And so what I did was, after a long struggle of getting proper medication, but mainly the insurance to pay for physical therapy, I finally began to get treatment, and that's what it really took. It took getting treatment, and by that point, the back condition, which was, I didn't realize until recently, and it took a long time. It took a bone scan to find out it was arthritis. Didn't show severe problems with the MRI. It showed deterioration in the L4 and the L5 discs. It showed some pressure on the sacrum, the sacroiliac joint. But this was times where I could barely walk, could barely get out of bed. And my work and my academic pursuits required me to be spending as much as 60-hour weeks at least. I was self-employed as well. And it was physical therapy that really got me saved. The insurance at the time, my late wife's insurance, would change all the time. One only offered 1 day of physical therapy altogether. Another time it was, 3 weeks. I have finally got 3 months, and that was extended to cover 6 months, several times a week. And were it not for that, I would probably have gotten far worse. I don't even want to think of where that was going. But it did sort of rescue my condition. Physical therapy is not is expensive. And this was combined with the fact that asking for these kinds of medicines was, well, I not only felt a certain amount of guilt for asking from them, but often would encounter doctors that would think that was the only purpose, the only reason. And like so many chronic pain patients, I began to question the legitimacy of my own problem, despite even not being able to walk or get out of bed at times. And as time went on, I learned how I had done yoga before, but that really seemed to help in so many ways. Breathing, basic meditation, biofeedback. I used almost everything in the book. The only thing I didn't try was acupuncture. Settled on PT, yoga, and the judicious use of pain medications. And this went on for a long time where I was able to produce an enormous amount of work. But at the time, I wasn't able to keep and sustain. One of the problems that was going on, I was just carrying too large a workload for any normal human being to be working 60-hour weeks plus trying to fit in publications and academia on top of it. So I would mix and match, and it wasn't until recently that I realized how much that got to me where I am now. Later, when my wife became very terminally ill with colon cancer, I lost an enormous amount of weight. I put myself second. Didn't think about it. The nurses shamed me into getting into bed because they were worried my back would get out. I would actually have to care for her each and every need. And that sort of exhaustion finally caught up to me, and I think it just there's a natural progression. It wasn't until I actually started running into the regulations when it was my wife who was sick that I began interest in the policy issues surrounding it. Here was a terminally ill woman. One of my promises is that she'd never be in pain. She was encephalopathic, unable to tell me. She came out, and I assure you she did, but I just suspected she was in pain. And then afterwards, found the oncologist himself was not even, he was prescribing out of fear of the regulations and not out of her needs. Well, that sort of triggered a lot of interest that I had. I had done organic chlorine pesticides as a pre-dissertation topic. Here's a dual-use commodity, same thing, risk-benefit. But this time it was much more personal because we were talking about the death of my wife of 18 years. So after that, I started to become very concerned that policymakers who had no idea what, and I don't mean not restricted to end-of-life care, but didn't seem to understand what chronic pain was. For laws they probably had never voted for, and regulations that most people don't really understand, were affecting the well-being and the welfare of people. And as my own condition stabilized under a certain regime, I learned how to cope with it. However, it is a progressive condition, and I can feel that that's not going to last forever. And so I'm speaking today on behalf of people that like to be functioning. I'm self-employed. I consult. I do fairly complex statistics all the time. So it's not about the side effects. It's about being able to be productive. And I think on that, I'll leave it here because this is the sort of issue that most chronic pain patients are up against.